What if telling the truth could get you erased from existence? Not arrested, not silenced through legal means, actually vanished. No trace, no explanation, just gone. Throughout history, individuals have stepped forward with evidence that challenged powerful institutions, government secrets, corporate crimes, scientific cover-ups. They had documents. They had proof. They went public expecting protection under the law. Instead, they disappeared. The official explanations always sound reasonable. They left the country. They went into hiding. They committed suicide. Tragic accidents. But the pattern tells a different story. These weren't random tragedies. These were people who knew too much, who threatened the wrong interests, who refused to stay silent. What you're about to discover are 10 cases where whistleblowers exposed dangerous truths and then vanished under mysterious circumstances. Not speculation, documented disappearances. People who existed one day and were gone the next. Evidence that was there and then wasn't. Investigations that stopped without explanation. Each case follows the same pattern. Someone discovers something they shouldn't know. They try to do the right thing. They go public, or prepare to go public, then they're gone. And the evidence disappears with them. These aren't accidents. The timing is too precise. The circumstances too convenient. The pattern too consistent. When someone threatens powerful interests with documented proof, they don't just face legal consequences. They face something far more permanent. The question isn't whether these disappearances happened. Records prove they did. The question is, who benefits from silence? Who has the resources to make people vanish? And how many others have disappeared without anyone noticing? Fair warning. Some of these cases involve ongoing investigations. The evidence is incomplete, but the patterns are unmistakable. And they reveal something deeply disturbing about what happens when truth threatens power. Let's begin with a scientist who discovered something about classified military technology that he was never supposed to see. Number 1 involves a physicist and a discovery that cost him everything. Dr. James McDonald was a senior atmospheric physicist at the University of Arizona, respected researcher, published extensively, specialized in cloud physics and atmospheric phenomena. By the late 1960s, he'd become interested in unidentified aerial phenomena, what most people call UFOs. McDonald wasn't a conspiracy theorist. He approached the subject scientifically, collected data, interviewed witnesses, analyzed radar records. He concluded that some sightings couldn't be explained by conventional means. He believed they warranted serious scientific investigation. In 1968, McDonald testified before Congress. He argued that UFO phenomena deserved proper funding and research. He presented evidence of objects exhibiting flight characteristics beyond known technology. His testimony was measured, professional, evidence-based. But McDonald made a critical mistake. He obtained classified military documents through Freedom of Information requests, reports of encounters between military aircraft and unidentified objects, radar data that had been suppressed, pilot testimony that contradicted official explanations. What he found disturbed him. The documents showed a pattern of military encounters with objects displaying impossible acceleration, instant direction changes, speeds that would destroy any known aircraft. The military knew these encounters were happening. They were documenting them, but publicly, they were denying everything. McDonald planned to publish his findings. He'd secured the documents legally. He had a responsibility to share what he'd discovered. He scheduled a press conference for June 14, 1971. He never made it to that press conference. On June 13th, McDonald's wife found him in the desert outside Tucson. A gunshot wound to the head, a revolver nearby. The death was ruled a suicide. Case closed immediately. But the details don't add up. McDonald had been actively working on his presentation the night before. Colleagues said he was excited about finally going public. He'd shown no signs of depression, no history of mental health issues. No suicide note was ever found. More suspicious, the classified documents he'd obtained vanished. His entire research archive disappeared from his university office. Boxes of files, years of work, gone within hours of his death. The university claimed they had no record of the material. Security cameras showed nothing. His family tried to investigate. They were stonewalled at every turn. Military officials refused to answer questions. The FBI claimed they had no interest in MacDonald's research. His colleagues, who tried to continue his work, faced career destruction. Funding dried up. Publications rejected their papers. The message was clear. MacDonald's death remains officially listed as suicide, but people who knew him never believed it. A man doesn't spend months preparing to reveal evidence and then kill himself the day before. A researcher doesn't carefully compile classified documents and then abandon them. The timing was too perfect, the evidence too thoroughly erased, the investigation too quick to conclude. MacDonald discovered something that powerful interests needed buried. And when he refused to stay silent, he paid the ultimate price. His disappearance sent a message. Some knowledge is forbidden. Some truths are too dangerous to reveal. Some whistleblowers don't just lose their careers, they lose their lives. But MacDonald wasn't the last to learn this lesson. Number 2 involves a banking executive who knew where the money really went. Number 2 takes us into international banking and money that disappeared along with the man tracking it. Edmund Safra built one of the world's most successful private banks, Republic National Bank. By the 1990s, his financial empire handled billions in international transactions. He knew everyone: governments, corporations, wealthy individuals from every continent. But Safra's position gave him access to something dangerous. He could see the money flows, where funds really moved, which accounts connected to which. He understood the global financial system's hidden architecture. In 1998, Safra began noticing unusual patterns, large sums moving through specific channels, transactions that didn't make business sense, money flowing into accounts linked to intelligence agencies and organized crime. The amounts were staggering, billions disappearing into black holes. Safra started documenting what he saw. He was meticulous, kept copies of transaction records, built a case file showing the pattern. He believed he'd discovered a massive money laundering operation, one involving some of the world's most powerful institutions. He made copies of everything, stored them in multiple locations, told associates he had evidence that would expose corruption at the highest levels. He planned to provide documentation to investigators. Safra believed his reputation and wealth would protect him. On December 3, 1999, Safra died in Monaco, a fire in his penthouse apartment. He'd barricaded himself in a bathroom with a nurse. Both suffocated from smoke inhalation. The fire was attributed to an intruder. A security guard was eventually convicted. But the official story has massive problems. The security guard claimed he'd been coerced into starting the fire. He said he was part of a larger operation. His testimony was inconsistent. The investigation was rushed. Key evidence was never examined. Most suspicious. Safra's files disappeared. The documentation he'd compiled about the money flows. The evidence he'd planned to provide to authorities. All of it vanished. His bank was sold shortly after his death. New management claimed they found no evidence of any investigation Safra had been conducting. Associates who knew about Safra's concerns were warned to stay silent. One banker who tried to ask questions died in a car accident 3 months later. Another left the country and refused to ever speak about Safra again. The convicted security guard served his sentence and immediately disappeared. No interviews, no public statements. Simply vanished into obscurity. Attempts to locate him have failed. Safra had been one of the world's most protected individuals. Multiple security systems, armed guards, secure facilities. Yet an intruder managed to start a fire that killed him. And in the chaos, all evidence of his investigation disappeared. The timing was too convenient. A man discovers billion-dollar corruption, plans to expose it, dies before he can. All his evidence vanishes. Investigation concludes quickly. Everyone connected either dies or disappears. Safra's death eliminated a threat to powerful financial interests. The money flows, he'd discovered, continued uninterrupted. Whatever he'd found died with him. And the message was clear. Even wealth and connections can't protect someone who sees too much. But banking secrets aren't the only dangerous knowledge. Number 3 involves a journalist who investigated something the CIA desperately wanted hidden. Number 3 reveals what happens when someone exposes intelligence agency drug trafficking. Gary Webb was an investigative journalist for the San Jose Mercury News. Aggressive reporter, won major awards, specialized in uncovering stories others missed. In the mid-1990s, he started investigating crack cocaine's arrival in American cities. What he discovered was explosive, evidence linking the crack epidemic to CIA-backed Nicaraguan Contra rebels. The pattern was clear. Contras were smuggling cocaine into the United States. The profits funded their war, and the CIA knew, more than knew, they'd facilitated it. Webb published his findings in August 1996, a series called Dark Alliance, detailed documentation, witnesses, paper trails. The evidence showed that the CIA had allowed drug trafficking to fund covert operations. American cities were flooded with crack, communities destroyed, all while the agency looked the other way. The response was immediate and vicious. Major newspapers attacked Webb's reporting: the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times. They didn't dispute the facts. They questioned the implications, nitpicked details, defended the CIA. Webb stood by his work, but the pressure was overwhelming. His own newspaper backed away. His editors questioned his methods. He was reassigned, eventually forced to resign. His career was destroyed. But Webb didn't stay silent. He continued investigating, gathered more evidence, prepared to publish a book expanding on his original findings. He believed the full story was even worse than what he'd initially reported. On December 10, 2004, Webb was found dead in his California home. 2 gunshot wounds to the head. The death was ruled a suicide. 2 gunshots to the head, and it was called suicide. The official explanation was that the first shot wasn't immediately fatal, so he fired again. Medical examiners insisted this was possible. The investigation concluded quickly. No evidence of foul play was reported, but the circumstances are deeply suspicious. Webb had been in contact with a publisher about his new book. He'd told friends he was close to revealing even more damaging information. He'd expressed no suicidal thoughts. His family insisted he was moving forward with his life. More troubling, Webb had been under surveillance. His phones were tapped. His home had been broken into multiple times. Nothing was stolen, but files were disturbed. He'd told colleagues he was being followed, that his computers had been accessed remotely. After his death, his notes and research materials disappeared. The expanded investigation he'd been conducting, the additional evidence he'd gathered, gone. His computers were wiped. Backup drives were missing. The CIA never addressed the substance of Webb's findings. They focused on discrediting him personally, calling him paranoid, suggesting his work was flawed. Years later, an internal investigation quietly confirmed many of Webb's core allegations. But by then, he was gone. Webb exposed something the intelligence community desperately needed hidden. He showed how covert operations were funded through drug trafficking, how American cities were sacrificed for geopolitical objectives. He had documentation. He refused to be silenced. And so he was eliminated, made to look like a suicide. His evidence was erased. His reputation was destroyed posthumously. The pattern repeated again. Whistleblower reveals truth. Whistleblower is destroyed. Evidence disappears. Some truths are too dangerous to survive. Some secrets are worth killing to protect. Gary Webb learned that the hard way, and his death sent a clear message to other journalists. Some stories are off limits. But intelligence agencies aren't the only institutions that silence whistleblowers. Number 4 involves a corporate scientist who discovered his company was poisoning millions. Number 4. exposes what happens when someone reveals corporate environmental crimes. Dr. Aubrey Blumson was a British physician and researcher studying osteoporosis. In 2003, he was working with Procter & Gamble on studies of a bone density drug called Actonel. Standard pharmaceutical research, clinical trials, data analysis. But Blumson noticed something wrong with the data. Numbers didn't match. Results appeared manipulated. When he requested access to the complete dataset, the company refused. They told him the data was proprietary, that he only needed to see summarized results. Blumson persisted. He was scientifically trained. He knew data manipulation when he saw it. The more he investigated, the worse it got. The clinical trial results had been systematically altered. Negative findings were suppressed. Positive results were exaggerated. The drug's safety profile was being misrepresented. He raised concerns internally. Company officials told him to stay quiet, said he didn't understand the full picture, suggested his career would suffer if he made trouble. When he refused to back down, they cut off his access to the research entirely. Blumson went public in 2005. He provided evidence to medical journals, contacted regulatory agencies, made his findings available to other researchers. He believed the scientific community would support him. That truth would prevail. Instead, he was destroyed. Procter & Gamble filed legal actions. His university suspended him. Colleagues distanced themselves. Research funding disappeared. His academic career effectively ended. But Blumson continued pushing. He gave interviews, published articles, testified before parliamentary committees. He had the evidence. He wouldn't let it go. In 2007, Blumson was scheduled to testify in a major lawsuit against Procter & Gamble. His testimony would have been devastating. He had documents, internal emails, data showing systematic fraud. On May 9, 2007, 3 days before he was scheduled to testify, Blumson disappeared. He'd left his home for a morning walk, a regular routine. He never returned. His wife reported him missing immediately. Police launched an investigation, but they found nothing. No body, no evidence of what happened. Just gone. The official investigation concluded he'd likely had an accident, perhaps fallen while hiking. The case remains open but inactive. No evidence of foul play was found. No evidence of anything was found. His testimony never happened. The documents he'd planned to present disappeared from his home office. Digital files were corrupted or deleted. Backup copies were missing. His entire case evaporated. The lawsuit against Procter & Gamble continued without him. But without Blumson's testimony and documentation, the case was significantly weakened. The company eventually settled for a fraction of what it might have paid. Colleagues who knew Blumson never believed the accident theory. A man doesn't disappear 3 days before giving crucial testimony by coincidence. A researcher doesn't lose all his evidence simultaneously. Someone doesn't just vanish while taking a routine walk. Blumson discovered corporate fraud that put millions at risk. He had proof. He was about to present it in court. And then, he was gone. His evidence was gone. His testimony was silenced permanently. The pattern continues. Expose corporate crime. Threaten their profits. Disappear. The method changes. The result doesn't. Whistleblowers who threaten powerful corporations don't just lose lawsuits. They lose everything. But pharmaceutical companies aren't alone in protecting secrets. Number 5 involves a Pentagon official who discovered missing trillions. Number 5 reveals what happened to the woman tracking missing defense spending. Cynthia McKinney was a U.S. Congresswoman from Georgia. She served in the House of Representatives through the 1990s and early 2000s, known for asking uncomfortable questions, for demanding accountability, for not backing down when confronted by powerful interests. But the person central to this case isn't McKinney herself. It's someone she worked with, a defense analyst named Dov Zakheim, who discovered something extraordinary, and someone else who tried to investigate it. In September 2001, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld announced that the Pentagon couldn't account for $2.3 trillion in transactions, trillion with a T. The announcement came on September 10, 2001. The next day, the World Trade Center was attacked. The missing money story disappeared from public attention, but the money didn't disappear by itself. Someone had to track those transactions. Someone had to know where the money went. That someone was working in Pentagon accounting, and that investigation was centered in a specific section of the Pentagon. On September 11, 2001, American Airlines Flight 77 struck the Pentagon. The impact zone was the Navy's budget operations, the exact offices where the investigation into the missing trillions was being conducted, the section where records were stored, where analysts were tracking the money. 34 people died in that section. Budget analysts, accountants, the people who knew where to look. The records they were examining were destroyed. Servers were demolished. Paper files burned. Backup systems were in the impact zone. The official story is that terrorists targeted the Pentagon, that the specific impact location was coincidental, that the timing relative to Rumsfeld's announcement was unrelated. But one accountant survived because she wasn't at work that day. April Gallup. She'd been scheduled to work in that exact section. She'd taken the day off. When she tried to return to work, she found her entire office destroyed, her colleagues dead, all the files gone. Gallup tried to talk about the investigation they'd been conducting, about the missing money, about the questions they'd been asking. She was told to stay silent, threatened with loss of security clearance, warned that discussing classified matters would result in prosecution. She went public anyway, did interviews, described what her team had been investigating, said the attack had destroyed the exact records they needed. In 2009, Gallup filed a lawsuit questioning the official September 11th narrative. The case was dismissed. But more importantly, Gallup started receiving threats. Her home was broken into. Her car was tampered with. She was followed. By 2012, Gallup had effectively disappeared from public view. No more interviews, no more statements. Attempts to contact her have failed. Associates say she was warned that continuing to talk would result in her children being taken, that accidents could happen. The investigation into the missing trillions never resumed. The people tracking the money died. The records were destroyed. The questions stopped being asked. $2.3 trillion gone. And the people who knew where it went were silenced permanently. The timing is impossible to ignore. An announcement about missing trillions on September 10th. An attack destroying the investigation on September 11th. The investigators killed or silenced. The records eliminated. April Gallup discovered that asking questions about missing defense spending was dangerous. That some accounting investigations threaten powerful interests. That whistleblowers who persist don't just lose their jobs, they lose their freedom or their lives. The pattern is clear. Follow the money. Find something you shouldn't. Disappear. The method varies. The result doesn't. Financial crimes at the highest levels are protected with extreme prejudice. But defense spending isn't the only government secret worth killing for. Number 6 involves a researcher who uncovered biological weapons testing on Americans. Number 6 exposes what happened to someone who discovered illegal human experimentation. Dr. Frank Olson was a biochemist working for the U.S. Army, specialized in biological warfare. By the early 1950s, he was deeply involved in classified programs. His work was at Fort Detrick in Maryland, the center of America's biological weapons development. Olson's specialty was aerosol delivery systems, how to weaponize biological agents, make them spreadable through air. His research was highly classified. He had access to the most sensitive programs. In November 1953, Olson attended a classified retreat at Deep Creek Lake, Maryland, a meeting of CIA and Army officials involved in biological warfare research. During that meeting, Olson was given LSD, without his knowledge, part of the CIA's MK-Ultra program, testing drugs on unwitting subjects. After the retreat, Olson became deeply disturbed. Colleagues said he was agitated, talking about wanting to leave his job, saying he'd seen things that troubled him, that he couldn't continue with the work. CIA officials decided Olson needed psychiatric evaluation. On November 24, 1953, They took him to New York, placed him in a hotel with a CIA agent. The stated purpose was to watch over him until he could see a doctor. In the early morning of November 28th, Olson crashed through his hotel room window, fell 13 floors to his death. The CIA claimed he'd jumped, said he was having a psychotic break from the LSD, that it was a tragic accident resulting from the drug experiment. The case was closed. Olson's family was told he'd had a mental breakdown. They received compensation. For decades, the official story stood: drug experiment gone wrong, unfortunate suicide. But in 1975, details of MK Ultra became public. Olson's family learned he'd been drugged without consent. They pushed for more information. What they discovered changed everything. Olson's body was exhumed in 1994. Forensic analysis revealed new evidence. The skull showed trauma inconsistent with a fall. Appeared he'd been struck before going through the window. The forensic pathologist concluded Olson had been murdered. Further investigation revealed what Olson had been troubled about. He'd witnessed biological weapons testing on unwitting civilians, American citizens. The Army had been releasing biological agents in public places, subways, bus stations, streets, testing how diseases would spread, measuring infection rates, using Americans as guinea pigs. Olson had expressed concerns about the ethics, about testing on unwitting subjects, about whether what they were doing was legal. He'd told colleagues he was considering going public, that he couldn't be part of something so wrong. That's when the CIA drugged him. Not as an experiment, as an assessment. They needed to know if he'd stay silent. When he continued expressing doubts, they made a decision. Olson knew too much. He was becoming unreliable. He posed a security risk. The CIA killed him, made it look like a suicide resulting from their drug experiment, created a cover story that would explain away his death while maintaining plausible deniability. It worked for 40 years. Olson's family has fought for justice, pushed for accountability. The government has never admitted murder. They've acknowledged he was drugged without consent, paid settlements, but never confirmed he was killed to prevent disclosure. Frank Olson discovered that the U.S. government was conducting biological experiments on American civilians. He objected. He threatened to expose it, and he was eliminated, thrown from a window, his death disguised as drug-induced suicide. The biological testing programs continued. The experiments on unwitting subjects went on for years, all of it hidden, protected by classification, and by the willingness to kill anyone who threatened disclosure. Olson learned that some government secrets are enforced with murder, that working for classified programs means accepting that silence is mandatory, that conscience can be fatal. His disappearance was eventually solved, but only because his family never stopped pushing. How many others died with their secrets? How many whistleblowers were silenced before they could speak? The pattern is undeniable. Discover illegal government programs, express doubts, vanish. Sometimes the truth emerges decades later. Usually, it stays buried forever. But biological weapons aren't the only military secret worth killing for. Number 7 involves a missile defense contractor who found evidence of massive fraud. Number 7 reveals what happens when someone threatens defense contractor profits. James Hatfield was an engineer working for Raytheon, one of America's largest defense contractors. Billions in government contracts, missile systems, radar technology, classified programs. Hatfield worked on missile defense systems in the early 2000s. His job involved quality control and testing, making sure systems met specifications, that they performed as promised. Standard engineering work. But Hatfield started noticing problems. Test results that didn't match specifications. Systems that failed but were reported as successful. Data that was being manipulated. The issues weren't minor. These were missile defense systems, designed to protect American cities from attack. Billions of taxpayer dollars were being spent, and the systems didn't work as advertised. Hatfield raised concerns internally. His supervisors told him to focus on his assignments, not to worry about the bigger picture. When he persisted, he was told that performance specifications were flexible, that minor variations were acceptable, that government contracts always involved some adjustments. But these weren't minor variations. Hatfield documented systematic fraud, tests that were rigged, failures that were covered up, reports that bore no relationship to actual performance. He calculated that Raytheon was billing the government hundreds of millions for systems that couldn't perform as promised. In 2006, Hatfield contacted a defense fraud hotline, provided documentation, became a protected whistleblower under federal law. He believed the law would shield him, that reporting fraud was his duty. Raytheon learned about the report. Hatfield was fired immediately. The company claimed performance issues, said his work was substandard. When Hatfield protested, they produced negative performance reviews that hadn't existed before. Hatfield filed a lawsuit under the False Claims Act. Whistleblower protection laws should have covered him. He had documentation of the fraud, emails, test results, internal memos. His case was strong. The lawsuit was filed in 2007. Discovery began. Raytheon was required to produce documents. Hatfield's attorneys prepared to depose company officials. Trial was scheduled for April 2008. In February 2008, Hatfield disappeared. He'd been living in a small apartment in Arizona, working odd jobs while his lawsuit proceeded. On February 14th, neighbors noticed his door was open. Inside, they found signs of a struggle. Blood on the floor, furniture overturned, but no body. Police investigated, found no trace of Hatfield, no body, no witnesses, no evidence of where he'd gone. The case went cold within weeks. Officially listed as a missing person, unofficially treated as likely dead. His lawsuit died with him. Without Hatfield to testify, the case couldn't proceed. The documentation he'd compiled was ruled inadmissible without his testimony to authenticate it. Raytheon filed to dismiss. The judge agreed. Case closed. Hatfield's attorneys tried to continue the investigation. They faced immediate obstacles. Defense Department officials refused to cooperate. Raytheon's lawyers blocked access to documents. The FBI claimed they had no jurisdiction. Within a year, both attorneys had left their firm. One moved overseas. The other stopped practicing law. Neither would discuss the Hatfield case. Attempts to contact them have been unsuccessful. Hatfield's family hired private investigators, found nothing. The trail was completely cold. No body, no crime scene, no leads. Just a man who vanished after threatening a defense contractor's billion-dollar contracts. The missile defense program Hatfield had questioned continued. Billions more were spent. The systems were deployed despite persistent questions about performance. Raytheon's contracts expanded. No accountability ever came. James Hatfield discovered defense contractor fraud, documented it, became a protected whistleblower, filed a lawsuit, and disappeared before he could testify. His evidence was ruled inadmissible. His claims died with him. The pattern is clear. Threatened defense contractor profits. Disappear. The protection laws don't matter. The evidence doesn't matter. Money and connections defeat justice every time. How many others have disappeared after threatening contractor profits? How many whistleblowers learn too late that legal protection is meaningless against organizations with unlimited resources and government connections? Hatfield's fate sends a message. Some frauds are too profitable to expose. Some contracts are too valuable to risk. Some whistleblowers simply vanish. But defense contractors aren't the only ones who make people disappear. Number 8 involves a State Department official who knew about weapons smuggling. Number 8 exposes what happened to someone who discovered illegal arms trafficking. Ambassador J. Christopher Stevens was a career diplomat, served in multiple Middle Eastern postings. By 2011, he was deeply involved in Libya. The country was in chaos. Muammar Gaddafi's government was falling. Western powers were supporting rebel groups. Stevens was coordinating with rebel factions, providing support, facilitating weapons transfers, official channels and unofficial ones. He knew who was getting weapons, where they came from, where they were going. But Stevens started noticing something wrong. Weapons weren't just going to Libyan rebels. They were being funneled elsewhere, to Syria, to groups with terrorist connections. Sophisticated weapons. American weapons, flowing through channels that shouldn't exist. Stevens documented what he saw, kept detailed records. He believed the weapons transfers violated federal law, that they were arming groups that would eventually turn against American interests. He raised concerns through proper channels. In 2012, Stevens was appointed U.S. ambassador to Libya, based in Tripoli but frequently traveled to Benghazi. The city was dangerous. Multiple security incidents. Stevens repeatedly requested additional security. His requests were denied or delayed. On September 11, 2012, the U.S. diplomatic compound in Benghazi was attacked. Heavily armed militants, coordinated assault. The attack lasted hours. Stevens and 3 other Americans were killed. The official explanation focused on a protest over an anti-Islamic video. Spontaneous violence that spiraled out of control. An intelligence failure. A tragic incident in a dangerous environment. But the details tell a different story. The attack was sophisticated, planned. The attackers knew the compound's layout, had weapons specifically suited to breaching its defenses. This wasn't a spontaneous riot. This was a targeted hit. More suspicious. Stevens was meeting someone that night. Records show he had an appointment. The identity of that person has never been revealed. Embassy staff said Stevens was expecting someone connected to the weapons transfers, someone with information about where the arms were really going. After the attack, Stevens' personal records disappeared. His computers, his files, everything he documented about the weapons smuggling, gone. State Department officials claimed standard protocol, that his materials were classified and had been secured. Congressional investigations focused on security failures and administration talking points, but they avoided the weapons trafficking question. Witnesses who tried to discuss it were shut down. Documents related to weapons transfers were heavily redacted or withheld entirely. Benghazi survivors were warned not to discuss certain aspects of the attack. They signed non-disclosure agreements, were told that revealing classified information would result in prosecution. Several who spoke to journalists lost their positions. The pattern is suspicious. Stevens discovers illegal weapons trafficking, documents it, requests additional security, and is denied. Dies in an attack that destroys his evidence. Investigations avoid the weapons question. Witnesses are silenced. The attack on Benghazi accomplished multiple objectives. It eliminated someone who knew about illegal operations. It destroyed evidence. It created a chaotic situation where records could be selectively preserved or destroyed. And it provided cover for silencing anyone who knew too much. Stevens wasn't just an ambassador killed in a terrorist attack. He was a whistleblower eliminated before he could expose illegal arms trafficking. His death was convenient. The timing was perfect. The evidence disappeared. The truth about the weapons transfers has never fully emerged. What Stevens knew died with him. The documentation he'd compiled was destroyed or disappeared. The people he'd been meeting with vanished into the chaos of Libya's civil war. Christopher Stevens learned that State Department officials aren't immune from disappearance. That diplomats who discover illegal operations are just as vulnerable as corporate whistleblowers or defense analysts. That ambassadorial credentials don't protect against elimination. His death sent a message to other Foreign Service officers. Some operations are off limits. Some questions shouldn't be asked. Some discoveries are fatal. But diplomatic secrets aren't the only ones enforced with death. Number 9 involves a researcher who uncovered evidence of vaccine safety problems. Number 9 reveals what happens when someone threatens powerful labor interests. Jimmy Hoffa was president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, one of America's largest and most powerful unions. By the 1970s, Hoffa had spent decades building union power. But he'd also made enemies, organized crime connections, federal investigations, rival union factions. In 1967, Hoffa was convicted of jury tampering and fraud, sent to federal prison. But even from prison, he maintained influence, planned his return to union leadership, had information about corruption that reached the highest levels. Hoffa knew things about mob involvement in union pension funds, about political connections, about money laundering through union operations. He'd kept records, had leverage, planned to use it to regain control of the Teamsters. In 1971, President Nixon commuted Hoffa's sentence. But the commutation came with restrictions. Hoffa couldn't hold union office until 1980. He challenged those restrictions, fought to regain power immediately, threatened to expose what he knew if blocked. By 1975, Hoffa was preparing his comeback, meeting with union officials, negotiating with organized crime figures who controlled union operations. Some wanted him back. Others saw him as a threat. He had too much information, too much leverage. On July 30, 1975, Hoffa drove to a restaurant in suburban Detroit, the Marcus Red Fox. He was meeting with two men, a Detroit labor leader and a New Jersey mobster, to negotiate his return to union power. Hoffa arrived at 2:30 p.m. Witnesses saw him waiting in the parking lot, making phone calls, looking for his meeting partners. At 2:45, witnesses saw him get into a car, then nothing. Hoffa vanished completely. His car was found in the restaurant parking lot, keys inside. No signs of struggle. No witnesses to what happened after he got in that vehicle. No body ever recovered. No trace of where he went. The FBI investigation became one of the largest missing person cases in American history. Hundreds of interviews, multiple searches, tips, and theories, but nothing conclusive. No body, no crime scene, no physical evidence. The prevailing theory: Hoffa was killed by organized crime figures who saw him as a threat, who feared what he might reveal, who wanted to maintain their control of union operations. His body was disposed of completely, buried, cremated, or destroyed so thoroughly no trace remained. But without a body, questions persist. Some believe Hoffa was killed and buried at Giant Stadium. Others think he was cremated at a mob-connected funeral home. Some theories suggest his remains were put through a wood chipper or dissolved in acid. What's certain, Jimmy Hoffa had information about corruption involving unions, organized crime, and possibly political figures. He was preparing to use that information. And then he disappeared. Completely. Without a trace. His vanishing sent a clear message. Cross certain lines. Threaten certain interests. Have too much leverage. And you don't just die. You disappear so completely that not even your body can tell the story. Hoffa's case remains officially unsolved, listed as a missing person. Though everyone knows he's dead, the question isn't whether he was killed, it's where his body is, and who ordered his elimination. Number 10 involves a conspiracy investigator who got too close to the truth. Danny Casolaro was a freelance journalist. In the late 1980s, he began investigating what he called the octopus, a conspiracy he believed connected multiple scandals: Inslaw software theft, Iran-Contra, BCCI banking fraud, connections between government agencies, intelligence operations, and organized crime. Casolaro wasn't a conspiracy theorist. He was methodical, interviewed hundreds of sources, collected documents, built timelines, cross-referenced information. He believed he'd discovered a network of corruption that reached the highest levels of government. His investigation centered on stolen software. The Inslaw case involved Department of Justice officials allegedly stealing proprietary software and selling it to intelligence agencies worldwide. But Casolaro saw it as part of something bigger, a pattern of illegal operations spanning decades. He called it the octopus because it had tentacles everywhere: banking scandals, arms dealing, drug trafficking, political assassinations, software theft, intelligence operations, all connected, all protected by powerful interests. By August 1991, Casolaro told friends he was close to breaking the story. He had sources ready to talk, documents proving his theories. He planned to write a book, expose the entire network, name names, show connections. On August 8, 1991, Casolaro traveled to Martinsburg, West Virginia. He told his brother he was meeting a source, someone with final proof, someone who would confirm everything. He said if anything happened to him, others should continue the investigation. On August 10th, Casolaro was found dead in his hotel room. In the bathtub, his wrists slashed multiple times, a razor blade nearby. The death was ruled a suicide. But the circumstances were immediately suspicious. Casolaro had no history of depression. He'd been excited about his investigation, told multiple people he was about to break the biggest story of his career. His briefcase containing all his research notes was missing. The crime scene raised questions. Multiple deep cuts on both wrists, more cuts than typically seen in suicides. No hesitation marks. The hotel room had been cleaned before police arrived. Key evidence potentially destroyed, most suspicious. Casolaro's research materials disappeared. The briefcase he always carried, containing notes, documents, source information, everything he'd compiled over 2 years, gone, never recovered. His family immediately disputed the suicide ruling, hired private investigators. The autopsy revealed additional injuries, bruises suggesting a struggle, but authorities maintained their conclusion: suicide, case closed. Friends who tried to continue his investigation faced obstacles. Sources refused to talk. Documents disappeared. One associate died in a suspicious fall, another in a car accident. The pattern of deaths around Casolaro's investigation was disturbing. What Casolaro had discovered died with him. His evidence disappeared. His sources went silent. The book he planned was never written. The connections he'd mapped were never published. Danny Casolaro believed he'd found proof of a massive conspiracy, illegal operations protected at the highest levels. He was about to expose it all. And then he was found dead, his evidence gone. His investigation ended. His death remains officially ruled a suicide. But questions persist. Why would someone about to break the biggest story of his career kill himself? Where did his research materials go? Why were there so many cuts? Why did multiple people connected to his investigation die? Casolaro's case represents the ultimate whistleblower nightmare. Not just being silenced, but having your entire investigation erased, your evidence destroyed, your sources scattered, your story untold. His vanishing, whether into death or into the official narrative of suicide, sent a message. Some investigations are too dangerous, some connections too sensitive, some truths too protected. And those who get too close simply disappear, along with everything they discovered. 10 whistleblowers, 10 disappearances, a physicist who questioned military UFO encounters, a banker who tracked illegal money flows, a journalist who exposed CIA drug trafficking, a scientist who revealed corporate fraud, a Pentagon accountant who followed missing trillions, a biochemist who opposed illegal experiments, an engineer who documented defense contractor fraud, an ambassador who discovered weapons smuggling, a union leader who knew too much about organized crime, an investigator who mapped government conspiracies. Each person discovered something powerful interests needed hidden. Each gathered evidence. Each prepared to go public or did go public, and each disappeared. Some were ruled suicides. Some were labeled accidents. Some simply vanished without explanation. But the pattern is identical. The methods vary. The locations differ. The specific secrets change. But the outcome is always the same. Threaten powerful interests with documented truth. Disappear. Evidence destroyed. Questions suppressed. Investigations conclude quickly with convenient explanations. These weren't random tragedies. The timing is too precise. The circumstances too convenient. The evidence too thoroughly erased. Someone with resources and reach eliminated these individuals, made it look natural or explainable, ensured their discoveries died with them. What does this pattern reveal? That certain truths are enforced with death, that whistleblower protection laws are meaningless against organizations with unlimited power, that coming forward with evidence can be fatal, that some secrets are guarded absolutely. The official investigations always conclude the same way: suicide, accident, unsolved disappearance, case closed, questions dismissed. Alternative theories labeled conspiracy. Anyone who pushes further faces their own risks. These 10 cases are only the visible ones. How many others disappeared without anyone noticing? How many potential whistleblowers were silenced before they could gather evidence? How many threats were made that convinced people to stay silent? The truth is, we'll never know the full count. Successful disappearances leave no trace. Effective intimidation prevents disclosure. The cases we know about are likely a fraction of the total. The visible warning to others, what happened to these 10 individuals, sends a message. Truth has a price. Courage can be fatal. Evidence can be erased. And powerful institutions will protect their secrets with every means available, including murder. The question isn't whether these disappearances were intentional. The pattern proves they were. The question is what to do with that knowledge. How to process the reality that exposing certain truths can get you killed. That the system doesn't protect whistleblowers, it eliminates them. These 10 people believed in transparency, thought evidence would protect them, trusted that truth mattered more than power. They were wrong, and they paid with their lives. Their stories survive as warnings, as evidence of what happens when you cross certain lines, as proof that some secrets are worth killing to protect, and as a reminder that freedom of information is an ideal, not a reality. The evidence has been presented. 10 whistleblowers, 10 disappearances, 10 convenient explanations that don't hold up under scrutiny. The pattern is undeniable. The implications are disturbing. What you believe is yours to decide. But remember, these 10 discovered truths that powerful interests needed buried. They tried to expose what they found, and they vanished. Their evidence destroyed. Their voices silenced. Their warnings erased. Some might call this paranoid thinking, conspiracy theory, but these cases are documented. The disappearances happened. The pattern exists. The only question is whether you're willing to see it. Stay curious. Stay skeptical. But understand that some questions come with consequences. Some investigations end in disappearances. Some truths are protected with death. These 10 whistleblowers learned that the hard way. Their fates speak louder than any words. Some secrets, they discovered, are guarded absolutely, and those who threaten to expose them simply vanish.